The novel Land of Zikola, ZYKOLLA, by the Egyptian author Amr Abdelhamid. And so, every day, he sat alone in his small room, pen in hand, and wrote the same ritual introduction. I am Khalid Hosni, 28 years old, a graduate of Cairo University's Faculty of Commerce, class of 6 years ago. My hometown is a small village called Sardab Foreek, in the Zikola Governorate. Today, my request to marry the woman I love was rejected for the 8th time, for the same reason. He would stare at the paper for a moment before pinning it to the wall beside 7 other sheets, each yellowing with time. The first one carried only his name, age, and hometown, ending with the line, "My request to marry the woman I love was rejected today." The second, rejected for the 2nd time. The third, rejected for the 3rd time. And so on, until the 7th. Leaning back, Khalid let his eyes wander to the ceiling. His thoughts drifted, carrying him 6 years into the past, to his final year at university, when fate had arranged his first meeting with Mona. She was from his own village, though they had never met before. They ran into each other on the road from the village to Cairo, and his joy had only grown when he discovered she was in her first year at the same faculty. From that day, their encounters became frequent, sometimes planned, sometimes by sheer chance. His gaze shifted to a large sheet of paper pinned beneath the 8 smaller ones. Written on it, in bold letters, was, "Rejected for the same reason, Mona's lunatic father." Khalid always chuckled bitterly at the word lunatic, because everyone in the village knew exactly who that meant. But no one knew the extent of the man's madness more than Khalid himself. The first time Khalid had gone to propose, fresh out of university and full of hope, Mona's father had stared at him with an odd, calculating expression before asking, "Why do you want to marry Mona?" "What?" Khalid blinked, confused by the question. The man repeated, slower this time, "What have you done with your life?" The question had caught Khalid completely off guard, his face flushing red. "What have I done?" "Well, I graduated from Cairo University's Faculty of Commerce. You know my parents died when I was young, and I live with my grandfather. I'm exempt from military service, and I'm currently looking for a suitable job." Mona's father cut him off. "And what makes you different from any other man? Why should I give you my daughter?" And with that, the meeting was over. Back then, Khalid thought the rejection had been because he didn't yet have a job. But when he returned with a respectable position months later, the same questions came. The same rejection. What have you done with your life? What makes you different? Questions with no satisfactory answer. Not on the 2nd proposal, not on the 3rd, not even on the 8th. Mona's father never once considered Khalid's love for his daughter, or her love for him, until finally, Khalid's patience snapped. "What have I done with my life? Nothing. And what exactly do you want me to do? I know you fought in 73. Does that give you the right to insult us? You want a hero for a son-in-law? Fine. Tell me how to become one. Should I go fight in Iraq to make you happy?" His voice was sharp now, his eyes blazing. "I will marry Mona, whether you like it or not." The whole village knew Mona's father was an odd man. He wanted his daughter to marry someone unique, someone one of a kind. What that meant exactly, no one knew. But everyone knew that at this rate, Mona was doomed to remain unmarried as long as her father drew breath. Still, Khalid didn't give up. He only wondered, what could make him unique enough to satisfy the man's strange condition? He had no answer. In the quiet of his heart, he even prayed for her father's death. Normally cheerful and quick with a joke, Khalid had grown quieter over the years. The sadness was becoming a permanent shadow on his face, something even his grandfather, nearing 80, the man who had raised him since childhood, could not ignore. One evening, his grandfather asked gently, "Still upset? You should be used to it by now." Khalid shook his head. "I can't imagine her with anyone else. I don't know what he wants. Doesn't he know the age of miracles is over? And are you just going to sit here with your head in your hand? Well, what else can I do? The old man chuckled. If you want my advice, you'd better bury yourself in a crypt. Something in Khalid's eyes lit up. A crypt? He paused. Grandfather, do you remember when I was little, and you'd tell me the story about the underground passage beneath our village, the one you went into 50 years ago? His grandfather smiled faintly. Of course I remember. I used to tell you that whenever you cried. Do you want me to remind you of your childhood days? Khalid laughed. No. Tell me about the crypt. What really happened? The old man fell silent for a moment, lost in thought. We were 4 young men, always looking for trouble. We'd heard tales of a treasure hidden in an underground tunnel, running beneath the village, a tunnel once used by the wealthy to hide their valuables during invasions. Everyone knew the place existed, but no one dared go down there. They said it was haunted, that anyone who entered would never return. We didn't believe in such things, so we decided to try. They had found the entrance beneath a boulder in an abandoned house. Late one night, they rolled the stone aside and descended the long staircase, each carrying a gas lantern. We reached a narrow passage and walked only a few steps before the air grew so heavy we could barely breathe. Then, all at once, our lanterns went out. And in the darkness, one of the boys screamed, "A demon!" We didn't wait to see what it was. We turned and ran, our knees knocking together. From that night on, no one dared go back. Khalid laughed. Still, it's a good memory. At least you were brave enough to go down, even if you ran back up. Although, he grinned. Maybe don't tell people about the knees knocking part. Later, alone in his room, Khalid lay awake thinking about his grandfather's story. It sounded like a legend, and yet the place was real. His grandfather never lied. His eyes fell again on the paper that read, "He wants someone unique. Unique enough to please his madness." And a thought came to him. If I can't marry Mona, I won't marry at all. Then louder, almost to the empty room. What if I went down into that crypt? What if there really is a treasure? Another voice inside his head scoffed. A treasure? That's madness. Don't forget. They say it's haunted. But a third voice, bolder, answered, If you're too much of a coward, then you don't deserve Mona. Is this the life you want? A commerce graduate working in a medicine warehouse, living off a salary that wouldn't last you half the month if not for your grandfather? If you love her, prove it to her and to yourself. If you find that treasure, you'll be the most famous man in the village. No. In Egypt. No. In the entire world. And if you don't, at least you'll know you tried. Khalid sat up suddenly, reached for Mona's photograph, and stared at it. I'm going down there, Mona. No matter what happens, I'm going. If your father's a madman, then so am I. Khalid thought he was talking to himself, alone in his room. He had no idea that someone was listening. Someone standing just outside the door, hearing every word he spoke aloud. His grandfather stood there, leaning slightly on his cane, expression calm and unreadable. Not a flicker of surprise crossed his face. It was as if Khalid's muttering about going down into the cellar was nothing unexpected, something the old man had almost been waiting to hear. He remained there until Khalid finally fell silent. The lights in the room clicked off, and the stillness of night settled in, broken only by the familiar sound his grandfather knew so well, the quiet rhythm of his grandson's breathing as he drifted into sleep. Later, the old man turned away, cane tapping softly against the floor as he made his way back to his room. He lowered himself onto his worn sofa and sat in silence for a few moments. Then, with a small movement of his cane, he pulled a small, time-worn wooden box closer. He opened it and drew out an old photo album, its leather cover coated in a thick layer of dust. Slowly, carefully, he turned the pages, each one revealing images faded by the years. his hand stilled on one particular photograph. The next morning, both Khalid and his grandfather rose early, as they always did. Khalid had to be at work, and his grandfather never slept after the dawn prayer, spending the early hours reading the holy book until his grandson emerged from his room. They ate breakfast together, as they had for years, prepared by the young woman who lived next door, a habit she had taken on long ago. Khalid kept glancing at his grandfather between bites, as though there was something on the tip of his tongue. At last, he broke the silence. "Abdo," he said, using the name he liked to call him. "Could you live on your own?" His grandfather looked at him, brow furrowed. "Why? Are you planning to travel?" Khalid hesitated, then met his grandfather's gaze again. "If I went away for a short while, could you manage on your own?" He leaned forward, voice softening as though to prepare him. "I know this must come as a shock, but I've decided to leave the country for a bit. I swear to you I'll be back soon. You won't even notice I'm gone." He tried to justify himself further. I need to go somewhere I can find myself. You know your grandson graduated from the Faculty of Commerce, and do you know where I work now?" "Yes," his grandfather replied, "in a pharmaceutical warehouse." Khalid gave a bitter laugh. "Your grandson works as a porter in a drug warehouse. A porter. Put the box here. Take the box there." He stood up to leave, adding, "It's just for a short while." But before he could step out, his grandfather's voice stopped him cold. "Why lie to me, Khalid? Why not just tell me you're going down into the cellar?" The words hit him like a thunderclap. He had made up the story about traveling just to hide the truth, so his grandfather wouldn't think he'd gone mad. He stared at the old man in shock. "The cellar? How did you know about that? I mean, what cellar? That's nonsense." His grandfather's eyes didn't waver. "I've known for a long time, a very long time." He motioned for Khalid to sit back down. His tone was steady, serious. "Why do you want to go down there?" Khalid hesitated, trying to turn it into a joke. "Why are you so hung up on this cellar business? I told you I'm traveling." "Why, Khalid?" his grandfather asked again. "Why do you want to go into the cellar?" There was no way out of it now. Khalid exhaled a long breath. "I want to prove to Mona and her father that I'm not like everyone else, that I'm a hero." "Is that all?" his grandfather pressed. "Yes, that's all," Khalid said, almost defensively. Then, with a faint smirk, he added, "And who knows? Maybe I'll even find the treasure you all went down there looking for years ago." His grandfather repeated the question. "That's all?" "Yes." His grandfather's expression hardened. "You mean to tell me you want to go down there for that?" Khalid stared at him, surprised by the gravity on his face, something he had never seen before. The old man continued. "Suppose Mona married someone else. Would you still go down into the basement?" Khalid fell silent. "I will never believe you want to enter the basement for Mona," his grandfather pressed on. "You want to go for another reason entirely, the same reason I went, and others before me. It runs in our blood, mine, yours, and your father's. It's our love for the unknown, our hunger to rebel, our thirst to discover something new, our craving to be different." He leaned back slightly, his eyes far away. "When you were little, I used to tell you stories about the basement and you would cry. You probably thought they were just bedtime tales to calm you down, but believe me, I always knew this day would come. When you were older, and I'd tell you about it again, and a single word about that place would make something deep inside you awaken. Mona's father has turned you away many times, and you know exactly why. So why now? Why this sudden need to play the hero? It's because yesterday, for the first time, you felt what your father felt when I told him about the basement. Except in your case, I know you want to go." He, on the other hand, simply vanished. Khalid's head snapped up. My father went into the basement? Not only your father, his grandfather replied quietly. He took your mother with him. They thought it would be a short trip, just a little adventure before coming back. You were 2 years old when they left, saying they'd return in a few days. Days became months. Months became years. Eventually, everyone believed they had died in an accident, and they thanked God you hadn't been with them. But the truth is, they went into the basement. He sighed deeply. I never blamed them. I told myself, you went down there too, and you were proud of it. The only difference is, God spared me. He looked directly at Khalid. That's why I won't be angry, or stop you if you choose to go. Even if I know your decision will take you away from me. But you must be sure you're doing it for yourself, not for some illusion you've wrapped around Mona. He pushed himself up from his chair and walked a few steps, his back now to Khalid. When you decide, come to me. There's a lot to be said about the Forik basement, things that someone other than me will tell you. Khalid left soon after. Instead of heading to work as usual, he went to meet Mona. She had called and asked to see him at one of their usual spots inside Mansoura University. On the way, his mind churned with his grandfather's words. Was he truly going because of Mona, or was it the pull of adventure? Then his thoughts drifted to his parents, whose faces he had never known. He had always been with his grandfather, never once seeing a single photograph of them. The only images in his mind came from what relatives told him. That he was tall like his father, nearly the same height, a little over 1.80 meters, with broad shoulders and a strong build. From his mother's side, they said his deep black hair and constant smile were exactly hers. And then, inevitably, his mind returned to the name his grandfather had mentioned for the first time, Forik basement. Who was this man who had a lot to say about it? He arrived at the meeting spot and saw Mona waiting for him, her multicolored headscarf bright against the dark flow of her black abaya. He had always teased her about that abaya, telling her he felt unlucky whenever she wore it. Today, he smiled at her as usual, but she didn't smile back. I'm sorry, she said quietly, for what my father did to you, for the 8th time. He laughed. No, I'm used to it by now. Everyone in town already knows I've broken the national record for getting rejected. I should be in the Guinness Book of World Records. He said it to pull her out of the sadness he found her in, but it was useless. She continued, her voice soft and pained. I used to think like you that my father wanted someone different for me, but suddenly he changed. Khalid frowned. What do you mean, changed? A doctor came to my father asking for my hand, she replied. I was certain my father would refuse, but to my shock, he agreed. What? Khalid burst out. He agreed? Yes, he's insisting I marry him. Tears welled in her eyes and slid down her cheeks. Khalid stared at her, his voice tight. And me? I tried to talk to him about my love for you, she whispered. He slapped me across the face, said he knows what is best for me, that my future will be secure with the doctor, and that with you, I would only suffer. Mona's words tangled with her tears. Khalid listened, unable to believe his ears. What was this maniac of a father thinking? He had once told Khalid he wanted his daughter to marry someone extraordinary, but apparently, extraordinary meant anyone except Khalid Hosni. Was it really possible for years of love to vanish overnight? He had never loved anyone the way he loved her. Why hadn't she fought back against her father's decision? Had she surrendered out of fear of becoming an old maid? The question swirled in his mind while she spoke. Then, she asked him to leave so she could get home before it was too late. It felt like she was running from him. He gave a bitter smile and waved her away without a word. It was the first time he had ever felt defeated, a sensation entirely foreign to him. Not once in all the times he had proposed and been rejected had he truly felt it. He had always believed in something called hope, even if he had to ask 100 times before she said yes. He remembered enduring the stares, the laughter of people when he told them he'd marry her one day, that their love story would be one for the ages. He remembered the time he foolishly asked her to marry him without her father's consent, only for her to refuse, leading to a long silence between them until he apologized. But now he felt more foolish than ever. She would agree to the doctor, just as her father wanted. Maybe she only met him today to ease her conscience. Years of love, melting away like a block of ice in seconds. His thoughts were shattered by the shrill ring of his phone. He answered to find his employer shouting at him for missing work. He lost his temper. "I'm not working for you anymore," he snapped, and hung up without another word. He returned to his hometown, walking its streets with his head bowed, tasting the bitterness of defeat in his throat. He didn't want to talk to anyone. When he reached home, he went straight to his room. The walls were covered with the sheets of paper he had hung over the years, each one marking a proposal to Mona, each one a rejection, 8 times in total. He stood before them, staring at each one in turn, a humorless laugh escaping his lips. Then he tore them down, shredding them into pieces. He sank to the floor, head in his hands, drowning again in memories. Then suddenly, he rose and strode to his grandfather's room. The old man had just finished his prayer when Khalid asked, "You once told me there's someone who knows a lot about the underground passage." His grandfather looked at him calmly. "Have you decided?" "Yes, I'm going down there." "For Mona?" Khalid steadied himself. "I've lost Mona. I've lost my job. I have to go." He paused, then added, "I need to find something in my life worth telling my children about. Just once I want to feel like a hero in my own eyes. This feeling of failure is killing me." His grandfather studied him quietly before asking, "Aren't you afraid you'll never come back, like your father and mother?" He replied, "Believe me, the only thing I'm truly afraid of is leaving you alone. But as long as you're encouraging me, there's no room for fear in my heart." His grandfather smiled. "And what about the ghouls, the ghosts, the fact that it's haunted?" "I don't think I'll find a demon half as difficult as a human being," he said with a faint smirk. "I've made up my mind. I'm going down there. And you were right when you said Mona wasn't the reason. On the contrary, after losing her in a matter of moments, my desire to go down there only grew stronger. Maybe I'll find in that cellar a memory that will make me forget 6 years of humiliating myself." He paused, then asked, "Who is this man? And where can I find him?" His grandfather's smile deepened. "Don't worry. He's heard every word we've said. And I think he is already certain that you truly want to enter the cellar." Khalid looked at his grandfather in confusion, unable to make sense of his words, when an elderly man, close to his grandfather's age, stepped into the room. Immediately, his grandfather gestured toward the newcomer. "Let me introduce you to the cellar madman. I'm sure you've heard of him." Khalid's eyes narrowed. "Of course, Mr. Mustafa Aslan," his grandfather continued. "Mustafa was the first person to ever think of going down into the cellar, 50 years ago. That is when we gave him the nickname, the Cellar Madman. He always claimed to have information about it that no one else knew, and he's been waiting for the day someone would decide to go down there, ever since your parents never came back." Then, with a knowing glance, the grandfather left the 2 men to speak alone. Khalid studied the old man with a mixture of surprise and curiosity, wondering about the strange words his grandfather had once spoken. He had known this man for many years, yet never realized that he was the so-called madman of the crypt his grandfather used to speak of when Khalid was a child. The old man broke the silence. "Your grandfather told me of your determination to descend into the crypt of Forik, and now I see he was right." Khalid frowned. "Yes, but this is the first time I've heard the crypt called Forik's crypt." The old man nodded gravely. "That is his true name, And if you search for it anywhere, you will find no trace of it, no record, no mention. He sighed and went on. People think your grandfather and I are mad whenever we speak of the crypt. They never believed that 50 years ago we actually entered it. But in truth, they are not wrong. Khalid tilted his head. Not wrong? What do you mean? The man's eyes grew distant. Yes, they're right to doubt. Perhaps I am the only one alive who knows this. 50 years ago, when the four of us descended, we never truly reached Forik's crypt. That is why I once asked your grandfather to leave me be. I didn't want to shatter the pride he carried in his heart. Khalid leaned forward. Then what was the tunnel you entered? Nothing but a passage leading toward it. Proof of this lies in its shallow depth and limited length. But the greater proof is this. Within minutes of entering, our gas lamps went out. Khalid whispered uneasily. Spirits? The old man chuckled. No, son. Poor ventilation. The tunnel is not the crypt. The air is thin, nearly gone once the entrance door is closed. When the lamps died, someone cried, "Spirits!" and panic spread. Everyone fled in terror. But later, I realized it was nothing more than one man's fear. Yet, in that moment, I felt something extraordinary, a joy beyond words. For I knew I had placed my foot upon the first step of the path to Forik's crypt. I held on to the hope that one day, someone else might reach it fully. Someone who could fulfill the dream I could not. But the years passed. Illness consumed me, and so I waited for another to take my place. Slowly, he pulled out an old, weathered book and laid it before Khalid. This book is unique. There is no other like it. Its author once entered the crypt himself. I stumbled upon it by chance in my father's library when I was young. But time had already worn it down. Only 10 pages survived, and all of them speak of Forik's crypt. He handed the book to Khalid, urging him to read aloud. Khalid opened the fragile volume, its pages filled with uneven handwriting. As he began to read, the old man leaned back, sipping a cup of tea that had long since grown cold. The words revealed the story of Forik, a wealthy man who had lived during the Age of Kings. Forik had owned the very lands where Khalid's village now stood, known today as Behu Forik, once called Behu Forika. He had commanded the digging of a vast crypt, carved deep into the earth, meant to shelter him and his people should invasion ever strike. The excavation and construction had taken over 15 years, and within its chambers lay treasures beyond measure. The anonymous writer described his own descent into the crypt, through the suffocating tunnel with no ventilation, a passage that had to be crossed quickly to reach the true stairway, one that plunged more than 30 meters underground. Yet once beyond, there were no problems with air. The crypt had been crafted with a mastery no one could explain, its hidden system of ventilation a mystery lost to time. Khalid's wonder only deepened when he read that, on nights of the full moon, the crypt was never dark. Though buried beneath the earth, it glowed with an otherworldly light. The engineers of the past, what brilliance they possessed. But the pages ended abruptly, the 10th sheet closing on an unfinished line. I once believed the treasure was the gold and riches hidden within. But I discovered something far greater, something more precious than all of Forik's wealth. I discovered, and there the words ceased, leaving the final mystery untold. Khalid looked at the old man with urgency in his eyes. "Tell me, what did you discover?" The old man shook his head. He didn't know. He had found the book in that very condition, and for 50 long years the same question had haunted him. What had the book's owner discovered? He fixed his gaze on Khalid. "If you wish to uncover what he uncovered, you must be in the crypt tonight." "Tonight?" Khalid echoed. "Yes. Tonight the moon will be full. According to the book, that's when the crypt reveals its secrets, bathed in moonlight." Khalid fell silent, then whispered, his voice firm with resolve. I'm ready to descend. Ready for the chance of a lifetime. By the time the old man left, it was nearing 6 o'clock. He had entrusted the book to Khalid, who pored over its pages again and again, each reading deepening his obsession. Curiosity burned within him. What had its author discovered? It felt as though he held in his hands a fragment of time's greatest secret. Could it be treasure beyond imagination? Ancient relics hidden below? Could I be the one to make the greatest discovery of the 21st century? His mind wandered, lost in daydreams. As the sun began to sink, Khalid climbed to the roof of his home. He let his eyes roam over his village. The endless fields, the tall trees alive with birdsong, the neighboring houses standing quietly as though in farewell. He breathed in the fragrant air of his homeland and spoke to it silently, as if this day might be his last. Let it not be so, he prayed, before returning to his room to finish his preparations. Night fell. The full moon lit the sky like a silver crown. Khalid waited patiently for the village to sink into its nightly silence. He knew it wouldn't take long. By 10 o'clock at the latest, the streets would be still. Only his friend, Dr. Majid Munir, ever stayed out later, closing his pharmacy well past midnight. Khalid couldn't risk being seen on his way to the abandoned house at the edge of town. He waited until the clock struck 1. Then, with a determined breath, he turned to his grandfather, smiling as though in farewell. I will be back, God willing. His grandfather returned the smile. You will return, God willing. But wait. He rose and opened an old wooden chest. From it, he pulled out a worn photo album. Khalid's brows knitted in surprise. What's this? The old man flipped carefully through the pages until he stopped at one faded photograph. He held it out with trembling hands. Do you know who these are? Khalid leaned closer, and his breath caught. These are your father and mother, his grandfather said softly. The last picture ever taken of them, before they were gone. Tears welled in his eyes, and Khalid's own followed. He stared at the photo in awe. This is the first time I've ever seen their faces. I waited for this day, his grandfather whispered. I punished myself for years, holding this moment back until now. He pressed the photo into Khalid's hands, wiped away his tears, and embraced him tightly. Khalid leaned close and whispered in his ear, I will come back to you, Abdo. I promise. Then, carrying both the book and the photo, he walked out into the night. Silence blanketed the town. The streets were deserted, save for Khalid, striding with purpose, a worn shoulder bag slung across him. Inside, he carried enough food to last several days, a lantern for light, the book the old man had entrusted to him, and a few papers and pens. He was certain there would be things worth recording. A camera, he decided, was unnecessary. His phone would suffice. His pace quickened as he neared the edge of town, toward the abandoned house. The closer he drew to its towering wall, the stronger his resolve grew. He would cross it. Meanwhile, his grandfather sat alone, reading the holy book, whispering prayers that Khalid might return unharmed. A sudden knock at the door startled him. He rose, thinking his grandson had returned, but when he opened it, he found Mona standing there. He blinked, astonished to see her at such a late hour. Where's Khalid? Why isn't he answering his phone? She asked, urgency sharpening her voice. The old man frowned. Why do you ask? Mona's face lit up with joy. It's over, grandfather. I convinced my father to let me marry Khalid. I couldn't wait until morning to tell him. I feared he might still be angry after what happened today. The old man's lips curved into a gentle smile, though he said nothing more. Khalid had already scaled the wall of the abandoned house. Lantern in hand, he made his way to the spot his grandfather had described in painstaking detail. The place where the great stone lay. Without those directions, he might never have found it. He braced himself and tried to push it aside. Even with his strength, it refused to budge. He tried again, teeth gritted, sweat beading on his brow. Still nothing. "I won't give up," he muttered through clenched teeth. Again and again he pushed, his voice breaking into a cry of determination. But the rock remained stubbornly unmoved. At last, he spotted an old wooden plank lying nearby. Perhaps it could serve as leverage. Planting it beneath the stone, he pressed down with all his might. His muscles strained, his jaw locked tight, his shouts echoing into the dark night. Until, with a groan, the rock shifted ever so slightly. The sudden movement sent him sprawling to the ground. But that was enough. With renewed effort, he pushed again, inch by inch, until the stone slid away, revealing an iron door hidden beneath it. Breath ragged, knees buckling, Khalid sank to the ground. His heart pounded, but a triumphant smile spread across his face. "Stay strong, hero," he whispered to himself. "This is only the beginning." He turned his gaze toward the iron door embedded in the floor, claiming a square of the ground. Whispering a prayer under his breath, he pushed it open. It was sealed with nothing more than a heavy stone, and as it shifted on its hinges, a long, grating creak broke the silence, a sound that betrayed how long it had remained untouched. He raised his lamp and cast its beam into the void. A vertical ladder descended into the darkness below. "Bismillah," he muttered to himself, steadying his nerves. "Our path into the catacomb begins." Moments later, he began descending the staircase. As soon as he stepped down, the door slammed shut behind him, as if sealing him in. He realized that the wooden plank, which had kept it open, had snapped. But he paid no attention to that. All that mattered to him was crossing the tunnel as quickly as possible. He continued downward without glancing below, stepping one stair after another, until he found himself inside a pitch-black tunnel. The only light was from his lantern. He moved forward a few steps, feeling his way along. In his right hand, he clutched the lantern, while with his left, he brushed aside the thick spider webs hanging in his path. He walked several meters, his heartbeat growing faster and faster. He strained his eyes, trying to glimpse the end of the tunnel, but the webbed curtains blocked his sight. Khalid pressed deeper into the darkness, searching for the cellar stairway the old man had told him about. His pace quickened as the air grew thin, squeezing his chest tighter with every breath. He clutched his throat, gasping, stumbling forward. But the stairway was nowhere to be found. He ran like a madman, his strength draining from him, palms sliding along the cold walls of the tunnel, desperate to find any opening. Nothing. Breathless, he whispered to himself, "Where are you, Path?" He knew he could not even turn back. He would suffocate before he reached the stairs again. Forward was his only chance. He rushed on, searching left and right, above and below, but there was nothing. At last, he collapsed onto the ground. The lantern tumbled from his hand beside him. With a faint, broken voice, he cried, "There is no cellar. None at all." Then silence. His head tilted to the side, his eyes nearly closing in surrender, until his gaze caught a faint spot of light, cast by the fallen lantern. A weary smile tugged at his lips. "Forik's cellar," he murmured, before letting his eyelids droop for a moment. When he opened them again, his eyes fixed on the outline of wooden planks stacked together in the glow, forming what seemed to be a small door on one side of the tunnel. The wooden door lay only a few feet away, while Khalid remained sprawled on his back, utterly drained. Then, with a sudden jolt, he stirred again, dragging his body toward the door. He crawled like a wounded creature, too weak to rise to his feet, fighting for breath as though drowning. Inch by inch he pushed forward, shoving with his legs, pulling with his arms, the lantern clamped between his teeth. He forced himself onward, whispering delirious words of hope, This is salvation. This is Forik's cellar. Where air lives, where life begins. The words gave him strength, and he edged closer and closer to the door. Summoning the last of his strength, he thrust his foot forward, yet once more his body faltered, collapsing just a few steps short. His eyes fixed desperately on the door. He stretched out his hand, but his fingers could not reach. They hung in the air as if surrendering. Then, with a primal cry that gathered every shred of strength left within him, he hurled his body forward like a stone crashing against an ancient wooden door. The rotting planks shattered beneath his weight, and he tumbled through, plunging onto a wooden staircase. Eyes shut, his body rolled downward like a ball bouncing from step to step, striking hard against the rough edges, falling deeper and deeper until at last, the impact eased. He opened his eyes slowly. Khalid found himself lying across one of the broad steps, his chest heaving with a long, refreshing breath. Air, pure, abundant, filled his lungs as though he had drunk from a well after years of thirst. Relief surged through him when he realized he no longer needed his lantern. The suffocating darkness was gone. He pushed himself to his feet, joy breaking from him in a cry. "I'm in Forik's cellar! I'm in Forik's cellar!" He looked down. The staircase still stretched further below. Without hesitation, he hurried downward, ignoring the bruises from his fall. He longed to discover everything before the moonlight vanished. His thoughts raced. Everything the book described is real. The air is here. The moonlight lights my way. What else did its author uncover? At last, he reached the bottom step, standing now within the cellar itself. Khalid found himself standing before a vast tunnel, far larger than the one he had passed through earlier. Its height neared 10 meters, and its width was almost the same. He walked into it, staring in awe at its massive walls, as though he were exploring a grand tourist site. Pulling out his pen and papers, he began jotting down a few lines about what he saw, moving deeper and deeper inside while asking himself, how could such an enormous passage exist beneath my town, known only to the author of that mysterious book and a handful of people no one would ever believe? It could be the greatest discovery of the modern age, one that might turn his hometown into a major attraction. Perhaps this was what the writer had meant by his discovery, the tunnel itself. Khalid walked on, captivated, even laughing hysterically as the pain he had been feeling faded away. Maybe, he thought, he would stumble upon a hidden treasure now. He searched every corner of the passage, unwilling to leave a single spot unchecked. Then his feet struck something. When he looked down, his heart jolted. It was a human skeleton. It was the first time he had ever seen one, though it would not be the last. The farther he went, the more he found. Fear slowly crept into his chest, as though the bones themselves whispered to him that this was the fate awaiting all who entered the tunnel. A dreadful thought crossed his mind, that one of them might belong to his father or mother. He prayed the truth was otherwise. Then he felt the light behind him dimming little by little. He glanced at his wristwatch. It was nearly 5 a.m. He realized the moon was beginning to set and had no idea what would happen next. The book had said the vault remains lit while the moon is present, and nothing more. After a short while, the vault's light faded gradually. He paid it no mind and pushed on, step after step, until he came upon an image carved into one of the vault's walls. A portrait of a man whose features oozed wealth. Smiling, he spoke aloud to it. "You must be Forik. I would like to introduce myself. I'm Khalid Hosni, the discoverer of your great vault, and I'll be living the best days of my life because of you." He took his phone out to snap a picture. No sooner had he pressed the button than the ground gave a violent jolt beneath his feet that nearly knocked him over. He turned to the side and watched the vault walls collapsing in the distance, rushing toward him, the collapse closing in fast. He stumbled backward a few steps, then had no choice but to turn his body and run forward. Khalid ran, the crashing walls chasing him like a lion pursuing prey. He could hardly believe his eyes. He felt as if he were trapped inside a dream. And he ran faster. The thunder of falling boulders pounded his ears. If even one rock hit him, it would mean death. His shoulder bag fell and its contents spilled out, but he didn't bother to pick anything up. His long legs and wide strides kept him moving. He ran toward who knew what, into the unknown, and screamed inside himself. How would he ever return to his country again? This was ruin. The vault was collapsing. What had happened above? Soon he found himself at a fork, where the vault split into two paths. He lunged into one without meaning to. The other path crumbled before he could reach it, as if the collapse itself were steering him. Then, to his surprise, he found he was running up a slope, ascending, while the collapse accelerated behind him, faster and faster, trying to swallow him whole. He fought the difficulty of the climb, striding quickly, until a blinding light came into view as far as he could see, the kind of daylight he knew well. He hurried toward it while the darkness and the falling debris still pursued him, reached the opening, and leapt out. The vault collapsed beneath him and shut, as if the earth had spat him back out. Khalid found himself sprawled on the ground, his head buried in the sand. He lifted it slowly, brushing the grains from his face and eyes, then looked up at the sky and laughed. He thanked God, convinced he had finally made it back above and escaped the collapse of that cursed tunnel. But when he turned his gaze skyward again, he noticed a shade of blue so pure, so clear, unlike anything he had ever seen before. He looked around and saw nothing but endless stretches of sand as far as his eyes could reach. Rising to his feet, he spun in place to take in his surroundings, only to discover a vast desert under a flawless sky. He struck his forehead with his hand and muttered to himself, "Wake up, Khalid. Are you dreaming? Where on earth are you? How could a desert appear here?" He turned once more, his disbelief mounting, and asked himself aloud, "Where is it?" He walked a few steps in every direction, but it was useless. There was nothing, only barren emptiness. Finally, he sat down in bewilderment, staring at the spot where the tunnel entrance should have been. It was gone, as if it had never existed. He gave a bitter laugh and spoke with despair. So it seems that tunnel was built for no reason other than to lead into this desert. The treasure, and Forik, just a trick. Now where am I? The Eastern Desert? The Western Desert? Sinai, perhaps? Or have I crossed the border? Libya? Saudi Arabia? His voice rose into a desperate scream, as if madness had seized him. Where am I? Hours had passed as he sat there, unsure of where to go. He took off his shirt and draped it over his head to shield himself from the burning sun. When he glanced at his wristwatch, he was startled to see that its hands had stopped moving. He didn't dwell on it for long, because just then he caught sight of two men running in the distance. Quickly, he stood up and hurried toward them. Hope stirred in his chest as he drew nearer, but when he noticed their strange clothing and the exhaustion etched onto their faces, like men suffering from some severe chronic illness, he stopped them and asked, "Excuse me, I need your help." But they ignored him and kept running. He chased after them, blocking their path again. "Why are you running?" One of them shot him a look and replied, "Can't you see what we're going through?" Khalid was taken aback by their odd accent. Smiling mockingly, he mimicked their tone. "Oh, yes, I can see, sir." Then he asked, "We're in Saudi Arabia, right?" The man stared at him, puzzled. "What do you mean, Saudi Arabia?" Khalid gave a weary smile, exhaled heavily, and muttered to himself, "These people are completely lost." The other man, panting, asked, "Are you a stranger?" Khalid replied instantly, "Yes, I'm a stranger," then added, "Where am I? And who are you?" One of them answered, "We are poor. We fled into the desert. Don't you have any food?" Khalid shook his head. No, unfortunately. I had some, but it was lost with my bag. He slipped his hand into his pocket and pulled out a 10-pound note. I have money. You can buy something to eat, if you tell me where I am, and how I can get back to my country. In a flash, one of them snatched the note from his hand, shoved it into his mouth, and chewed it down. Khalid gaped at him in disbelief. Are you that hungry? The other man replied, It seems to me you're a generous man. That's why I'm certain you're not from here. You must be very wealthy. Khalid laughed, glancing down at himself, his tattered clothes covered in the dust of tunnels and passageways, his miserable state. Wealthy? He thought. That fool sees 10 pounds and thinks I'm rich. Playing along as though humoring madmen, he pressed them further, his patience thinning. I need to know how you survive in this desert. What are you running from? And most importantly, where exactly am I? The man who had eaten the money paused, as if trying to make sense of the question, then said, We are poor. Life in the desert will be far better for us than in the land of Zikola. Khalid froze, astonished. The land of Zikola. The other man asked, You don't know ZYKOLLA? No, Khalid replied. Where is this land of Zikola? All I see is desert everywhere. The man scoffed. Who in this age doesn't know ZYKOLLA? He turned to his companion and muttered, The rich, always mocking us like this. Then he gestured toward a direction ahead. It's down there, wealthy one. Without another word, the two men continued their frantic run through the sands. Khalid followed the direction the man had pointed to. He walked until he found himself standing at the edge of a high plateau. Looking down, his breath caught in his chest. Beneath him lay a vast city, magnificent from above. Buildings of all kinds spread out before his eyes, interwoven with lush green fields that looked like farmland and shimmering blue stretches of water. Khalid found himself sprawled on the ground, his head buried in the sand. He lifted it slowly, brushing the grains from his face and eyes, then looked up at the sky and laughed. He thanked God, convinced he had finally made it back above and escaped the collapse of that cursed tunnel. But when he turned his gaze skyward again, he noticed a shade of blue so pure, so clear, unlike anything he had ever seen before. He looked around and saw nothing but endless stretches of sand as far as his eyes could reach. Rising to his feet, he spun in place to take in his surroundings, only to discover a vast desert under a flawless sky. He struck his forehead with his hand and muttered to himself, Wake up, Khalid. Are you dreaming? Where on earth are you? How could a desert appear here? He turned once more, his disbelief mounting, and asked himself aloud, Where is it? He walked a few steps in every direction, but it was useless. There was nothing, only barren emptiness. Finally, he sat down in bewilderment, staring at the spot where the tunnel entrance should have been. It was gone, as if it had never existed. He gave a bitter laugh and spoke with despair. So it seems that tunnel was built for no reason other than to lead into this desert. The treasure, and Forik, just a trick. Now where am I? The eastern desert? The western desert? Sinai, perhaps? Or have I crossed the border? Libya? Saudi Arabia? His voice rose into a desperate scream, as if madness had seized him. Where am I? Hours had passed as he sat there, unsure of where to go. He took off his shirt and draped it over his head to shield himself from the burning sun. When he glanced at his wristwatch, he was startled to see that its hands had stopped moving. He didn't dwell on it for long, because just then he caught sight of two men running in the distance. Quickly, he stood up and hurried toward them. Hope stirred in his chest as he drew nearer, but when he noticed their strange clothing and the exhaustion etched onto their faces, like men suffering from some severe chronic illness, he stopped them and asked, Excuse me, I need your help. But they ignored him and kept running. He chased after them, blocking their path again. Why are you running? One of them shot him a look and replied, Can't you see what we're going through?" Khalid was taken aback by their odd accent. Smiling mockingly, he mimicked their tone. "Oh, yes, I can see, sir." Then he asked, "We're in Saudi Arabia, right?" The man stared at him, puzzled. "What do you mean, Saudi Arabia?" Khalid gave a weary smile, exhaled heavily, and muttered to himself, "These people are completely lost." The other man, panting, asked, "Are you a stranger?" Khalid replied instantly, "Yes, I'm a stranger," then added, "Where am I? And who are you?" One of them answered, "We are poor. We fled into the desert. Don't you have any food?" Khalid shook his head. "No, unfortunately. I had some, but it was lost with my bag." He slipped his hand into his pocket and pulled out a 10-pound note. "I have money. You can buy something to eat, if you tell me where I am, and how I can get back to my country." In a flash, one of them snatched the note from his hand, shoved it into his mouth, and chewed it down. Khalid gaped at him in disbelief. "Are you that hungry?" The other man replied, "It seems to me you're a generous man. That's why I'm certain you're not from here. You must be very wealthy." Khalid laughed, glancing down at himself, his tattered clothes covered in the dust of tunnels and passageways, his miserable state. "Wealthy?" he thought. "That fool sees 10 pounds and thinks I'm rich." Playing along as though humoring madmen, he pressed them further, his patience thinning. "I need to know how you survive in this desert. What are you running from? And most importantly, where exactly am I?" The man who had eaten the money paused, as if trying to make sense of the question, then said, "We are poor. Life in the desert will be far better for us than in the Land of Zikola." Khalid froze, astonished. "The Land of Zikola?" The other man asked, "You don't know Zikola?" "No," Khalid replied. "Where is this Land of Zikola? All I see is desert everywhere." The man scoffed, "Who in this age doesn't know Zikola?" He turned to his companion and muttered, "The rich, always mocking us like this." Then he gestured toward a direction ahead. "It's down there, wealthy one." Without another word, the two men continued their frantic run through the sands. Khalid followed the direction the man had pointed to. He walked until he found himself standing at the edge of a high plateau. Looking down, his breath caught in his chest. Beneath him lay a vast city, magnificent from above. Buildings of all kinds spread out before his eyes, interwoven with lush green fields that looked like farmland and shimmering blue stretches of water.